How many cups of coffee would you say you drink in a day? If you drink more than 10, you need help. But don't worry, we're not here to be that help or to try and talk you out of having coffee. Rather, we're here to go and tell you how to get a nicer cup of coffee and make it right in your own home. That's right, there are very simple recipes out there to let you make coffee for cheap enough and have more than one cup per brew. So, given all of that, allow us to show you how to make Cuban coffee. Cuban coffee, an overview. While there are a few different coffee drinks that are popular in Cuba, the drink known as Café Cubano is composed of strong Cuban espresso blended with sugar that turns into a caramel foam. The coffee beans in Cuba tend to be a very dark roast, which means the brewed espresso can end up on the bitter side. The sugar foam in the popular drink counters this trait. The dark roast beans are traditionally brewed in a mocha pot, but in the US, most people use a typical espresso maker to get similar results. Fortunately, you can easily make a Cuban coffee with either brewing method. The first few drops of espresso go into a prepared Dimities cup, or tacitas, with sugar. The heat from the espresso helps you to whip the sugar into a thick, satisfying foam called espumita in Cuban slang. That whipped sugar creates a topping that slightly mimics the usual crema found on top of a pulled espresso shot. The heavy sugar foam also helps cut through the bitter flavors in the concentrated dark roast coffee grounds, resulting in a drink that needs no milk to lighten it up. It's a favorite of Cubans everywhere, and at any time of the day, at breakfast with pan tostado, toasted Cuban bread, or pastries, at lunch, or even dinner. There are other much-loved coffee drinks in Cuba as well, and they're worth investigating too. Types of Cuban coffee. Just like with any coffee culture, coffee in Cuba comes in many cherished formats, and the Café Cubano has a few variations that are worth exploring while you're experimenting with this specialized drink. All of these variations can be made with proper espresso out of the espresso maker of your choice, but traditionally, the mocha pot reigns supreme in Cuba. Colada, the most common coffee drink in Cuba, a 4-ounce coffee combined with the sugar foam we've already mentioned, generally served in cups only slightly larger than espresso cups. It's less than a standard cup of coffee, but the brew is strong enough and sweet enough that 4 ounces is sufficient for any coffee lover's needs. Cortadito. This beloved espresso drink is made with unsweetened coffee and steamed milk. It's on par with a macchiato Cuban style. The intense flavor of the dark roast coffee grounds is offset by just enough dairy to round it out. Café con leche. Much like the cortadito, this drink features unsweetened coffee and steamed milk. But this variation is closer to a latte or café au lait, with more milk added compared to the cortadito. While of course there are plenty of people in Cuba who take their coffee black with no sugar or sugar foam, these drinks are part of a rich history of coffee drinking on the island, and one that has been imported by Cubanos everywhere they've gone. Café Cubano, Cafecito history. While the coffee plant found its way to Cuba in 1748, the island didn't really develop a proper coffee industry until the 1790s. When the country saw a stronger French influence due to an influx of Creoles fleeing Haiti in the wake of the Revolution. Over time, the coffee production in Cuba grew to rival its other main export, sugar. The fact that sugar and coffee were both major industries probably plays a major role in their marriage in the beloved Café Cubano and its decadent sugar foam. In addition to a bustling export business, domestic consumption of coffee grew as the Cuban people incorporated Cuban espresso into their daily routines. Cuba would go on to become the top coffee exporter in the world in the 1940s. But the Cuban Revolution of 1959 was the precursor to a sharp decrease, particularly as embargoes from the US and other countries influenced the ability of Cuba to both import and export trade goods. The sharp drop in production that followed the nationalization of industries has resulted in a sadder Café Cubano on the island itself. cheaper Robusta beans have somewhat replaced what the island used to produce. And some of that ground coffee is also cut with chicorée, a pea-like vegetable that adds bulk to the coffee or espresso. Outside of Cuba, many immigrants and their descendants still prefer Cuban espresso brands like Café Bustelo and Pilon, though American conglomerates have bought out most of the brands. But the dark, rich flavor remains, making a Café Cubano easy to achieve. How to make Cuban coffee. To make a Café Cubano, you'll need a few specific ingredients and a couple of pieces of equipment. The good news is that what you need isn't very expensive, and the components you need for this recipe work equally well for the cafecito, the cortadito, café con leche, and so on. Here's what you'll need. A mocha pot. If you have another espresso maker, this can also work in a pinch. Ground Cuban coffee, such as Café Bustelo or Pilon Espresso. If you can't find these brands, you can substitute some very dark roasts ground for espresso. Demi-tasse cups. Traditionally, many Cuban coffee lovers use a measuring cup for whipping their sugar into espumita, and it can be helpful. A spoon or another implement for stirring, whipping the sugar. Sugar. Opinions vary as to what kind of sugar is best, but you can use whatever type you prefer. Brown sugar creates a thicker foam and a sweeter flavor with hints of the molasses. White granulated sugar gives a more neutral flavor. Once you've got all your ingredients and equipment ready, you're ready to make your Cuban coffee according to the recipe. Steps. To get started on this recipe, set up your mocha pot with your Cuban espresso or other dark roast coffee in the correct grind. Step 1. Make your Cuban espresso. We recommend using pre-boiled water in the bottom chamber of your pot to speed up the process a bit. Note, it's also possible to use an espresso maker for this. Just brew a regular shot instead. Step 2. Sugar time. While you're waiting, add your sugar to the espresso cups or to your measuring cup if you're using that tool for the process. We recommend starting with 2 teaspoons of sugar for each cup. Of course, you can add more sugar, up to 3 teaspoons of sugar, equal to 1 tablespoon, if you like your coffee sweeter. Step 3. Make a concentrated mix. Once you have your mocha pot espresso ready in the pot, add a few drops of the coffee to your sugar in the cup, and begin stirring and whipping up the mixture while you let the pot continue to brew. It should be like a concentrated mix. By the time you have your sugar foam whipped up properly, the stronger espresso you're brewing should be done, no matter your brewing process. Step 4. Add more coffee. Pour the remaining Cuban espresso over your sugar foam, stirring all the while. You can add more coffee if you want a stronger taste. If you're using a measuring cup, you can pour it into the cups and serve immediately. A favorite kind of coffee. While it's not your typical coffee shop fare, the cafecito or Cuban coffee is a favorite for a good reason. Alongside the café con leche and the cortadito, it's a great balanced cup full of flavor and aroma. It's definitely essential to make sure you serve immediately because you don't want to lose the creamy sugar foam. While Cuban restaurants are a great source for the delicious beverage, it's easy to learn how to make Cuban coffee at home. With the right ground coffee, the proper espresso maker, and a little experience making the sugar foam that is so important, you can make Cuban coffee style and enjoy what most Cubans consider a daily pleasure, taken in a small cup. So, what do you think? What do you think of this look at Cuban coffee and how it is something you should definitely try? Are you curious now about how you can go and make this coffee for yourself? Or are you someone who has already tried and enjoyed Cuban coffee before? What do you personally think is the best coffee out there right now? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and we'll see you next time on the channel.